This Parsha podcast is dedicated by my dear friend, Dr. Paul Block of Arizona, in loving memory and Lilu Nishmas, his mother, Mrs. Mildred Block of blessed memory, Mindel Basrab Tzvi Hirsch, whose yahrzeit is today, the 22nd day of Elul. May her soul be elevated in heaven. We are approaching the end of year 8 of the Parsha podcast with the unending help of the Almighty. This is actually the last Parsha, the last Shabbos before Rosh Hashanah, before the end of the Jewish calendar year. Please God, we will try to squeeze in another Parsha podcast before Rosh Hashanah, because the schedule this year is the 2 days of Rosh Hashanah fall out on Thursday and Friday, followed immediately, of course, by Shabbos, which will be Parshas Ha'azinu. So we'll try to get the podcast out a little bit early next week, so that way it could be released and enjoyed before Rosh Hashanah, and everyone can be ready not just for Rosh Hashanah, but for the days that follow. And of course, given that this is at the end of the year, I want to thank all of y'all for, thank God, another amazing year at the Parsha podcast and at the wonderful Torch Center in Houston, Texas. Thank you all for your friendship and for your listenership and for your wonderful support. And please God, may we all be blessed with a happy and healthy, sweet new year, a year of only blessing and only goodness and only great health and prosperity and lots of fantastic Torah and, of course, blessings and salvation to our brothers and sisters in the Holy Land, both those at war, the hostages, may the Almighty protect them, and those, of course, who are on the civilian front. We're all really on the front. We're all on the front lines. And please God, the Almighty should shower all of us with blessing and with goodness and with a sweet new year. May we all be inscribed and sealed in the book of life, and may we be recipients of only divine goodness. The theme this year, as you know, is Dad, deep and deeper. When we study Torah, we connect with our antecedents, with our dad, our granddad, our great-granddad, and so on, all the way back to Sinai. Torah connects us with our glorious past. And Torah is deep. And we're going to try to go a bit behind the scenes, beneath the surface, to try to peel away at the patina, the cover of the Torah, and try to see a bit deeper. I think it's been a fantastic year, but I want to say that this episode will certainly qualify on both fronts, on both interpretations of the theme of Dad. I'm going to share with you an astonishingly deep idea, really two deep ideas, two deep and radical ideas that I heard from my grandfather of blessed memory. So it's deep, it's deeper, and of course, it connects us with our past. There is a theme that is featured in our Parsha, really in both of our Parshios, because this week is both the Parsha of Nitzavim and Vayeilech. They are lumped together as they are most years. In both installments of this week's Parsha, we find a theme where Moshe is invoking heaven and earth to come and serve as witnesses. This is the end of the Torah. This is the end of Moshe's life. And he's gathering the nation and he's sharing with them his final parting message. And twice this week, in both installments of the Parsha, and once in next week in Parsha Ha'azinu, so 3 consecutive Parshios, we read how he is summoning heaven and earth to serve as witnesses. In chapter 30, Parshas Nitzavim, Moshe is warning the people to not veer astray. Your heart should not depart. You shouldn't veer off course. You shouldn't bow to foreign gods and serve them. And I promise you that you will surely be destroyed, meaning in the event that you serve other gods. You won't have a long life, many days upon this land. And then chapter 30, verse 19, Ha'idosi b'chem hayom. I come and call and summon as witnesses today, es hashamayim ve'es haaretz, the heavens and the earth. And I tell all of you, life and death I've placed before you. Habracha v'haklala, blessing and curse, may you choose blessing, ubacharta b'chaim, so that you live, you and your descendants. Moshe is summoning heaven and earth as witnesses to this message. Rashi tells us why heaven and earth as witnesses. Because Moshe, after all, he's not going to be around forever. And the heaven and earth will always be around, and the heaven and earth that we see today, that we experience today, that we engage with today, they were around then, and they can still serve as witnesses for his message. A second idea Rashi tells us, and we'll get back to this at great length. Why is Moshe summoning heaven and earth? Heaven and earth are there to give a message. Moshe is trying to encourage the people to not fall prey to the seductions of idolatry and all the other exciting values and behaviors and choices that deviate from the path of God. And we need a bit of encouragement. And you know who can really help us see clearly in our decisions that we have before us? Heaven and earth. Look at the heavens, Rashi explains. God created the heavens, and they're following his will. Did they change their behavior? Did it ever happen, perhaps, that the sun did not rise in the east and did not illuminate the entire world? The heaven shows us what it's like to follow God. Look at the earth. Did you ever plant something in the earth and nothing grew? Did you ever plant wheat and barley sprang up, sprouted forth? The heaven and earth, they follow instructions. The sun, the heavens, the earth, they follow God's instructions, and they don't have reward. If they adhere to God, they don't get rewarded. If they violate the will of God, they don't get punished. And nevertheless, they follow God. I summon heaven and earth, says Moshe. They're here as witnesses, and they're going to show you what you ought to do. They don't get rewarded if they listen to God. They don't get punished if they repudiate God. But you do. And they follow God unquestioningly, with consistency, with reliability, notwithstanding the fact that they gain no reward and they face no punishment. You should surely do the same. So Rashi is explaining here what's Moshe doing when he's summoning heaven and earth. The first opinion is that heaven and earth are witnesses. They're going to stick around forever, and therefore they can always come and affirm that this message was conveyed. And the second opinion that Rashi cites here in chapter 30, verse 19, is that heaven and earth, they're being summoned because they are arguments for righteousness. They have much less skin in the game than we do. There's no reward, no punishment for them. Nevertheless, they are completely dedicated to the will of God. And therefore Moshe says to the nation, you should certainly faithfully uphold the instructions of God. That's the first instance where we read about heaven and earth being summoned. The second instance is in chapter 31, verse 28. This is in Parsha's Vayeilech, which is the second installment in this year's edition, because they're bunched together, double Parsha. Moshe gives the Torah to the Levites. This is the last day of his life, and he's giving the written Torah to the Levites. And he tells them to place it next to the Ark of the Covenant. It should be there. It should serve as a witness. And of course, this is the meta theme of the whole book, is that Moshe is trying to prepare the nation for the day after, for when Moshe is no longer around. So the Torah that Moshe wrote, that can serve as a witness. And then Moshe explains, I have grounds to be worried. I know how defiant you are. I know how stiff-necked you are. Because even now, I'm here. I'm watching everything that you're doing. And you're still defiant. So if you're defiant when I'm around, certainly once I depart stage left, when Moshe is dead, certainly you'll have a tendency to veer away from the path of God. Gather together, continues Moshe. Verse 27 of chapter 31. Gather all the elders. Gather all the officials. And let me call to testify heaven and earth as witnesses against them. And Moshe continues, I know when I'm going to die, you're going to be tempted to veer off the path. So again, Moshe, a second time, just the chapter after we had In chapter 30, Moshe calls heaven and earth to serve as witnesses a second time in chapter 31. And chapter 32, which is next week's Parsha, Hazinu, again, Moshe calls heaven. Moshe summons the heaven. Moshe summons the earth. And again, they are serving here as witnesses. What's going on here with the heavens and the earth? Specifically, I want to focus on one point that Rashi is explaining as to what the lesson is of the heaven and earth. In the second interpretation of Rashi, in chapter 30, verse 19, Rashi tells us that Moshe is telling the nation, look up to the heaven. Look down at the earth. They are models that we ought to emulate. God created the heavens. Did they change their prescribed behavior? Did the sun not rise in the east and illuminate the whole world? Look at the earth. God created it, and the earth follows its orders. And its orders are that if you plant, it will grow. And if you plant wheat, wheat will grow. If you plant barley, barley will grow. And they have no reward and punishment. And nevertheless, they are faithful in their adherence to the instructions of God. You have a lot at stake. If you violate the will of God, you'll be punished. If you adhere to the will of God, you'll be handsomely rewarded. If the heavens and the earth, if they are so reliable in their following of the orders of God, you should certainly do the same. And of course, the question is quite obvious. God's telling us to look at the heavens and the earth. They hearken to God. They never deviate from God's will. And the consequence for their disobedience, it's not that severe. There's no reward, no punishment. And they still always follow God's will. We have a lot on the line. Reward and punishment. And thus, we certainly should follow God. And we should have the same heavenly reliability, earthly reliability. We should follow God with sun-like consistency. The halacha tells us that the best time to pray, Shachris in the morning, the best time to begin the Amidah prayer is at sunrise. That's the ideal time. A couple of years ago, I had the great privilege of traveling to Israel, and my flight landed in the early hours of the AM. I grabbed my car from Hertz, and I hustled over to Jerusalem, and I had the great merit of going to the Western Wall, very close to where the temple once stood, and praying the morning prayers. And the place was full. The plaza was absolutely full. And everyone's praying. You know what it's like in Jerusalem. It's loud and people are moving and it's hustle and bustle. And then in an instant, everyone begins the Amidah prayer. So all the earlier prayers, all the preparatory prayers, all the Psukkah de Zimmer, all the blessings and all the blessings of the Shema, all the prayers that we do, the 20, 25 minutes of prayers that we do before the Amidah, there's lots and lots of noise. And then, like, instantly, it's silent. You can't hear a pin drop. Why? Because everyone wants to pray at the exact moment of sunrise. I have an app on my phone that tells me exactly when sunrise is. And if I travel to a different location, it will look at the coordinates, the GPS, and it'll tell me what time is sunrise exactly down to the second where I am. In our shul here in Houston, there is a daily minyan, daily prayer service at sunrise. We have lots of daily services, but there's one that is at sunrise. And therefore, because the time of sunrise changes every day, they start about 20, 25 minutes beforehand. So every day it's a different time. The starting date, starting time is not, 6:30 every day. There's 6:33, and then the next day is 6:34, and so on. It always adjusts with the changes in sunrise. And if you go there, you'll see that most of the people who are praying, they have an app on their phone, and it's a countdown timer. It's a countdown to sunrise. And they know that they're always trying to make sure that you finish all the prayers exactly at the stroke of sunrise, so you could pray. You should begin the Amidah prayer with Nates, with sunrise. I had the great privilege of being the Chazan, of leading the services many years in the early minyan, in the Nates minyan on Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur. And that's, of course, a festival. We don't use our phones. And you have to start like at 7:07 and 14 seconds. That's exactly when you have to begin the Amidah prayer. But you have like 17 minutes of prayers before that. So you have to really pace yourself, not go too fast, not go too slow. And everyone's on their watch and everyone's timing you. Everyone knows exactly when it is, but you don't exactly have a way to say, well, this paragraph should be done, in 1 minute and 12 seconds and so on. But the point is, sunrise is very reliable. You could set your clock to it. It arrives like clockwork. And Moshe is telling the nation, look at the sun. The sun is following God's orders. It never happened that the sun did not rise in the east and illuminate the world. And therefore, I'm summoning heaven and earth as witnesses, and they are what you should model. The earth is also reliable. Did you ever plant something? It didn't grow? Did you ever plant one tree, put in the apple seed, and suddenly something else sprouts in its place? Never happens. They're reliable. They always, always, always follow the will of God. You should emulate heaven and earth. You should model yourselves after the heaven and the earth, just as they follow God with absolute reliability. We ought to likewise, Moshe tells us, we should adhere to him completely. Why can't you be more like your brother? Someone that I know may have once heard that. Why can't you be more like the sun, like Mars, like the earth? I never heard that one. Moshe is telling the nation that the Torah is demanding sun-like consistency from us. Just copy heaven and earth. Isn't it easy? And of course, the question's obvious. I'm a human. I'm not a machine. I have all sorts of things pulling me in every direction. I got these impulses and these instincts and these desires and these predispositions and these weaknesses and these flaws and even some shortcomings. I have a whole agenda in my life that's opposing the will of God. I have something called the Yitzhara. I have free will. I have free will with all the ramifications of that, and the heaven and the earth and the sun don't. What's Moshe telling us? What's God telling us? It's completely baffling. How can we legitimately be told, why can't you be more like the sun? What is the possible comparison between us and the sun, us and the heavens, us and the earth? These are all pre-programmed. They're like machines. They don't have free will. And they're completely incapable of violating their programming. Now, remember, this is the Torah. Moshe is telling the nation this message. And if it's a message for them, it's also a message for us. Otherwise, it would not be in the Torah. And there's no hyperbole in the Torah. We're being told over here that we ought to emulate heaven and earth. And not only that, it ought to be easier. After all, the heaven and earth, they have no skin in the game. They have no reward if they listen. They have no punishment if they violate. We have reward and punishment. It should be much easier. If the sun can always rise in the east without garnering any benefit and without avoiding any negative consequences, it should be a cinch for us. But of course, we're humans. and they're not. We have free will, and they don't. That is a very serious question on this verse as it's interpreted by Rashi. And this is a question that my grandfather, blessed memory, spoke about often. And again, no hyperbole. If the Torah is telling us that we ought to mimic the heaven and the earth and the sun, that means that we are indeed comparable to them. And that's a very deep idea, very profound. It must be that it's perfectly legitimate to be told, look at the heaven, look at the earth, I'm summoning them over here, look at the sun. You should mimic their perfect and reliable and consistent obedience to God. And the question is, how so? And my grandfather, over the years, he spoke about this numerous times. And each time it's a little bit different. But there are two basic approaches that he adopted. And again, it's very deep. It's deep and deeper. There are two different ways to demonstrate why it, in fact, is reasonable to request us to mimic heaven and earth. Let's explain. The sun, it's reliable. It's consistent. You can know down to the second, down to the millisecond when sunrise is and when sunset is, and you know exactly which direction it's coming from. And we could even know what's going to be in 100 years from now. And we know for sure. We could calculate that in the year 2289, there's going to be a partial eclipse. I just made up those numbers, but you remember the eclipse, right? Everyone came to the eclipse. I was the only man in America who didn't have the eclipse classes. What's the big deal with the whole eclipse? My goodness, everyone's going nuts. Traveling out of town. I realized that I'm the nutso one because I wasn't into it. But anyhow, we can know for sure when there's going to be an eclipse. Why? Because it just follows. It follows a predetermined, it seems, path. And we know down to the millisecond to the millimeter. We know for sure it's going to rise in the east and set in the west. It's going to follow orders. Why? The earth, it's also consistent. If you plant wheat, it's going to sprout wheat and nothing else. The blue bonnet seeds that we plant here in Texas will yield blue bonnets and nothing else. It's consistent. Why is it consistent? So Rashi tells us that it's because these things, the heaven and the earth, they choose to adhere to what God wants. And idea number one that my grandfather developed is that the heavens, the earth, the sun, they do this. They follow God's plan, not because it's incapable of violating the will of God. It has free will. The heavens, the earth, the sun, they're certainly, at least theoretically, capable of veering off the path. They are free to choose. But they always choose what God wants. And the reason why is because of their closeness to God, their proximity to God. They always choose what He instructed them to do. They're so close to Him. They're so cognizant of God. They're so aware on the most palpable and tangible level of God's power and God's dominion and how God's really the only existence. They want nothing more than to just do the will of God. They are in complete, awesome awe of God. That for them, even though they could theoretically violate the will of God, it would just be inconceivable for them to do that. And therefore they always follow God, not because they must, but because they feel like they must. Theoretically, they do have free will. God's handiwork, the heaven, the earth, the sun, the moon, the stars, they are on some level, like us, an independent entity. And theoretically, they can choose to act as they please. The sun, theoretically, could choose to not illuminate the whole world, to not rise in the east. The earth can choose, theoretically, to sprout something aside from wheat when wheat is planted, or not sprout anything. But that will be a violation of the will of God. And they consistently choose to listen to God. The sun rises in the east each morning and sets in the west, and the earth yields wheat when wheat is planted and barley when barley is planted. Now this idea, it's actually explicit in the sources. All the way back in Genesis. Genesis chapter 1. We're way closer to the next iteration of Genesis next year, 5785, than we are to this current year's Genesis. In Genesis chapter 1, it talks about the firmament, the rakia, the heavens. The heavens were created on which day of Genesis? So Rashi in chapter 1, verse 6 of Genesis, the verse says, let there be a sky, let there be a heaven. But wait a minute, Rashi says the heavens were around on day one, because the first verse, Genesis 1:1, it says, Shamayim Varetz, the heavens and the earth. That's day one. So how come on day 2, let there be a heaven, or let there be a firmament? The word rakia and Shamayim are different. But Rashi understands that the rakia was already made on day 1. So what does it mean that on day 2 it was fixed? So Rashi tells us that it was indeed created on day 1. But it was still a little drippy, a little liquid. And it stiffened from the roar, so to speak, of God, when God said, let there be a firmament on day 2. God screamed, whatever that means. On day 2, let there be a rakia, let there be a firmament. And the sky, the heavens, froze into place because of this roar. The idea being here, why is the heaven the way it is? Because of the roar of God, so to speak. Now, of course, let's not be infantilized by this to think that God is roaring like some sort of animal. It means that the perception that the heavens had of the existence of God was such that they just stiffened and remained stiff for thousands of years, for millions of years, whatever this was, different subject, since God said, Yihi Rakia. This is an example of this idea. The heavens, the sun, the earth, they're following the will of God. Why? Not because they're compelled to do it, they have no choice. They are theoretically capable of going rogue. But their intense, their palpable recognition of God, which we call fear of heaven, their closeness and their relationship with Him is so intense that to the outsider, it appears that it's like they're handcuffed. They are free to choose, but they always, always, always choose to listen and to hearken to God. My grandfather furnished a bit of an analogy for us. If you see like a piping hot frying pan, is it possible for you to choose to place your hand there for 10 seconds? Or could you even choose to put your hand there? You see it glowing. Could you put your hand there? You could, but you would never, ever, 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 ever do that. You have a million chances to do it. You'll do it exactly 0 times. Why? Because it's frightening. It's terrifying. It's asinine. It's crazy to do what you are proposing. So 1,000,000 times I will choose to not do it, and 0 times I will choose to yes do it. I have choice. Yeah, sure. But I'll never do it. That is how the heaven and the earth and the sun work. And we call it, of course, fear of heaven. And the sources tell us that the big change that's going to happen in the times of Messiah, it's not that we will lose free will, we'll lose our ability to choose poorly. It's just that our recognition of God and the intensity of that relationship will be such that it will be absolutely madness to choose anything aside from the will of God. We'll have such extraordinary closeness with God. It will look to the outsider like we have no free will. We will have free will, like the heavens and the earth, like me passing the frying pan. It'd just be unthinkable to do it. And thus, heaven and earth, it could actually serve as a model for us. Heaven and earth, they're being summoned over here. And Moshe is telling the nation, copy them, mimic them, emulate them. Yes, they have free will. That's an important insight. But it's only as if they have free will, because their proximity to God is such, their recognition of God is such that they're completely dedicated to doing what he wants of them, and thus they just can't disobey. Their fear of God, their fear of heaven, that recognition will overshadow the free will, will drown it out, and will make it appear that they are compelled. And that's the goal that Moshe is telling the nation. And our sources tell us that this is what will be in the times of Messiah, and we should strive to make this a reality to the best of our ability. This is something which I think is definitely deep and deeper. Maybe even not that, it's pop, it's profound, overwhelmingly profound. It's a completely new perspective of how we understand the celestial beings, the heaven and the earth, and how maybe we're comparable to them. And truly what's expected of us. What transcendental greatness is expected of us. We should have such tangible fear of heaven. It should be so real within us that to violate the will of God, it's doable theoretically, but no one would ever in the right mind consider doing that. Sun-like reliability. That is the bar. That is the standard that Moshe is laying out for the people. Now, if we stopped here, I feel like we executed our mandate of having a deep insight, deep and deeper into the Parsha. But we persist. On other occasions, my grandfather offered a different interpretation into this comment in Rashi. We asked the question, Moshe is telling the nation, go mimic the heavens and mimic the earth and mimic the sun. Look at them. They're following God. You should do the same. All the more so because they have no reward. They have nothing at stake. No reward, no punishment. But you have so much on the line. You should certainly follow God with sun-like reliability. And the question was, well, they have no free will and we do. Answer number one is that actually they do have free will. Like us, on some level. The second approach flips this on its head. We, on some level, are like the heavens and the earth. Let's assume that the heavens and the earth don't have free will. At least on some level, it appears to be that there is no free will. It's 1,000,000 to 0. They always choose the will of God. And thus, effectively, they don't have free will. On some level, my grandfather, blessed memory, used to explain this Rashi. On some level, we are like the heavens and the earth that effectively we don't either have free will. We are bound and compelled to follow God. This is an exquisite idea you're about to hear. A novel idea. The verse tells us, chapter 30, verse 19, I am calling the heavens and the earth to testify. I'm placing before you the life and the death, the blessing and the curse, and you should choose life. So you live, and your descendants live. And Rashi tells us, we mentioned this many times. I want to say sometimes you'll never forget it if you're still listening. Most of you already tuned out many minutes ago. That's okay. Moshe is telling the nation, look at the heavens, look at the sun, look at the earth. They're following orders with absolute dedication, with absolute reliability. Do the same. Mimic them. Emulate them. But we're not the earth, and we're not the heavens, and we're not the sun. We have free will, they don't. In the second approach, my grandfather, blessed memory, says that actually, on some level, there's a little part of us, a little corner of our repertoire of qualities. Humans like a whole world. How many neighborhoods are there in the world? It's infinite, right? It's millions, hundreds of millions of different neighborhoods in the world. How many different parts are there of the human? Millions, billions, depends how you count, right? And in our character, and our temperament, our nefesh, how many different aspects and dimensions? It's basically infinite. Our sages tell us that there's one part, one element, one dimension, one realm of every human that's absolutely astonishingly and scintillatingly pure and holy and righteous and elevated. We all have one aspect, one quality, one trait, one dimension that's completely flawless. Like a tzaddik gomor, which is the Talmud's words, a tzaddik, a righteous one, a completely righteous person. And we all have that. And there's a way for us to take that part of ourselves, that one untainted, unsullied, uncorrupted, and incorruptible part of ourselves, and grab onto it, and hold it tight, and preserve it, and protect it. And through that one untainted, unblemished part of ourselves, if we hold onto it tight, it will begin to ripple outward, to cascade outwardly until the purity and the righteousness and the elevation and the piety, it spills over gradually and gradually until it makes everything around it pure and holy and elevated and refined. And by holding on really tightly, our sages tell us, to that one point of holiness, we can actually transform the entirety of ourselves, the whole world, the whole universe of ourselves, of the human, into being righteous and upstanding and perfect. We all start off with that, this one point of uncorrupted holiness, and our job is to preserve that. That can get ruined if we don't guard it, but we have it by default. It's perfect. In that point, in that area, in that one slice of ourselves, we are the sun, the moon, the stars, the heavens, the earth. We are completely like those beings following the will of God. Naturally, innately, we have within us a corner, a small part. It's not the whole thing. We're not like that. We're not angels. A small part of ourselves where we naturally are like the sun, just follow God with clockwork. And my grandfather blessed memory used to say that this is noticeable by babies. Sometimes you have a kid, just wants to give kindness, benevolence, willing to forfeit everything to help another person. You have other kids, other babies, that will always say the truth. And even if they know that they're going to suffer and they'll be punished for it, they'll say the truth. And you have others who just want to study the myriad Torah. Everyone else, you got to tempt them. You got to say, well, I'll give you the lollipop. I'll buy you the new shoes, the new Nikes. I'll buy you a Stanley cup. Nothing to do with hockey. Maybe you'll study a little bit. Some people, they're just naturally drawn to it. My grandfather blessed memory, my grandmother told me that when his babies were little, he would spend hours gazing at them. Because when the child comes, nothing about their innate breakdown, the innate layout of their character has been affected by their environment. So you could get a picture, if you know what to look for, you get a picture of their actual quality breakdown, the good qualities, the bad qualities, and so on. But everyone starts off with one corner of themselves that's flawless. That's like the heavens and like the earth. And if you guard it and you protect it and you do whatever you can to make sure it does not get corrupted, because it is possible for it to get affected by external forces. That quality is a sun. It will rise in the east and illuminate the world. It's the earth. It's the heavens. Well, it's almost like it's not affected by free will. And that is, like the earth, it's a fertile ground for all manner of perfection to sprout. That one refined quality can transform the entirety of a person. That one node in the network can influence the entire organism and transform the entire organism. I know this is deep, but that's what we promised. I promise it's deep and deeper. My grandfather, blessed memory, used to use this idea. In many of his books, he would write about this idea. This is how you perfect yourself. You find that one unsullied point, that one sun-like point that you have within you, and harness it, and hold tight and hold fast onto it, and allow its influence to cascade outwardly. And that starting point, where you're going to plant, so to speak, the seeds of your perfection, it's something that you got for free. It's an area where there is no battle. There is no free will battle over it. My grandfather blessed memory used to explain, this is Parsha. Moshe is talking about the greatness that everyone has within them. And it's so close to you. It's in your mouth. It's in your heart to do it. It's so easy. You don't need to cross over the oceans or to ascend to the heaven. It's within you. It's in your mouth. Open your mouth. It's right there. It's in your heart. It's inborn. It's instinctive. What that's referring to is that one point, that one untainted point, the one point where you're like the sun. There's no free will battle over it. That's what Moshe is telling the nation. I'm calling the heavens, calling the earth. You have this within you. You are, on some level, like the heaven, like the earth, like the sun. But there's one difference. Unlike the sun and the heavens and the earth, we have all sorts of other things. We're maybe 1% pure, and 99% it's a big battle. And in fact, this is just the next layer of this framework. There's actually 1% of ourselves that's completely corrupt. Just like there's 1 point of holiness is 1 point of impurity within every person. And those two are really jousting. Those two poles are jousting, are at odds with each other. And they're actually opposites of each other. And that's the deep science of self-discovery and self-transformation. The sun and the moon, they don't have that counterweight. They don't have all those other characteristics. They don't have the Yetzer Hara. They don't have all the other forces. They have just that point of holiness. And therefore, what does Moshe tell the nation? How does the verse continue? I'm calling the heavens. I'm calling the earth. Let them come here and show you what you're capable of. You are on one level like the heaven and the earth. You have complete, unadulterated, unblemished, unbridled purity within you. But there's something else. You have other stuff. Continues Moshe, Hachayim v'Hamavis, you have life and death within you. You have good and bad within you. You have blessing and you have curse within you. And that's what it's all about. Both the good and the bad are implanted within you. They're both innate. And it's your choice. Which of these innate, these built-in, these pre-programmed qualities are you going to follow? And Moshe concludes, choose life. Choose the sun that you have within you. Choose that part of yourself that's naturally good, that's naturally pure, that's naturally perfect, and it's like the sun. Preserve that. Protect it. Ensure that you never allow it to be infringed upon or encroached upon. Maintain the purity of that beachhead of righteousness that you have within you. Protect it. Preserve it. Choose life. Very, very deep ideas here, courtesy of my grandfather of blessed memory. And again, it's really a verse. You have to explain to me what Moshe is doing by summoning the heavens and the earth. He does it 3 times. And Rashi tells us a variety of different interpretations as to what Moshe is trying to convey. But one idea is that we should mimic the heavens and the earth. Well, they follow God because they have no choice. And the first explanation we say, well, they do have a choice, but they're compelled because they have fear of heaven. Choose life. Choose connection with the Almighty. And the second idea is that maybe they don't have free will, but neither do we on some level. And if we choose life, if we hold on to that life, we grasp it and we preserve it, and we are tenaciously vigilant in maintaining it, we too will reap the merits of life. I think these are some great lessons for the upcoming high holidays, where we remember really what it's all about, the stakes of our life. There's a lot on the table. It's no coincidence that we're reading this right before Rosh Hashanah. Every year, it's right before Rosh Hashanah. Moshe makes it very clear. He distills it for us. Life and death. Choose wisely. Choose life. May we all be so fortunate as to be deserving of life. May we be remembered for life, be inscribed in the book of life, and have the kind of life the Almighty wants of us, the higher life, the advanced life, the life that is eternal. I thank you for listening. You have yourself a wonderful day and a wonderful week. And please God, we should all be prepared for the high holidays which are upcoming, and we shall all be inscribed and sealed in the book of life and receive only blessings and only goodness in this upcoming year. My email address is rabbiwallbegim.com. Have a wonderful Shabbos, a splendid Shabbos, the last Shabbos of the year. It should be a powerful Shabbos. It should be a vibrant and vigorous Shabbos. And please God, with help the Almighty, we'll talk again next week.